Meeting of the Human Resources Governance and Stakeholder Relations Committee of Waterfront Toronto. And I've been advised that a quorum is present and it is appropriate to proceed. So welcome to all of you who are joining our meeting today. We appreciate your interest and participation. And I'd also like to remind you that the open session of today's meeting is being recorded and will be posted for the public to view. And we ask that people please keep their microphones and cameras off unless they're speaking. So the first item of business is the approval of the meeting agenda. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda for the meeting? Is there a mover?
Happy to move, it's Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew. Seconder? I may have.
Actually, you can
do that, Wendy.
I'll chair and second. Is any discussion? All in favor? Contrary minded? Okay, so move forward. So it's approved. So I now ask if there's any conflicts of interest to be declared. None declared. We can move on to the business of the meeting. Thank you. So the next item is the consent agenda. And the first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the open session of June 11th, 2020. May I please have a motion to approve the June 11th, 2020 meeting, open minutes, open session
So
minutes?
moved.
Thanks. And as a second, I'll second. Any discussion? All in favor? Contrary minded? So approved. Okay, so the next item is the governance documents review. And we'll be hearing a presentation from our General Counsel, Ian Ness, on the governance document review process that the corporation is now undertaking. Ian, will you please present now?
Sure, thank you very much. So you'll see in the materials, there's a brief report. It's starting at page 8 of the report, or at least of the board book. The corporation has identified 14 key governance documents that are listed there. With the exception of 2 documents, they all exist now. And those 2 exceptions would be bylaw number 3. Board remuneration is done in a different way now than via bylaw. And there's no formal, mandate for the corporate secretary. Obviously, the corporate secretary undertakes duties, but it's not in writing right now. So we have these documents, but to be honest, they haven't been thoroughly reviewed for some time. In some cases, it's several years. So last year, what we decided to do was to undertake a review of those documents. They've been reviewed internally by internal counsel. They've been reviewed by applicable members of the senior management team. Our CEO has provided comments. And they've been reviewed by external counsel, and that's all 14 of them. However, and we also spoke to committee chairs earlier in the year about their particular committees and the mandates of those committees. So they've all been reviewed. They're all in various stages of being revised, but we recognize that we are going to have a very full board meeting in December. So what we've decided to do is not put forward all those documents. We just think it's too much to expect the board to do in December, and we'll bring it forward the next meeting. However, what we would like to do right now is seek approval for a recommendation from this committee for the approval of the mandate of the corporate secretary. As I mentioned, that is one of the documents that we don't have in writing right now. And it was actually specifically identified by our internal auditors, MNP, in their review that they did last year. So it's the form of the mandate is in your board book starting at page 9. I'd be happy to deal with any specific questions, but what I would ask, if appropriate, is that this committee make a recommendation that the board approve the form of that mandate for the corporate secretary. And the form of resolution is on page 7 of your board book. So I'm happy to answer any questions or deal with any questions, but other than that, I don't think there's anything else to say.
Does anyone have any questions?
If none of the committee members do, I just had a quick one.
Go
Sure.
ahead, Patrick.
Oh, great. When it comes to the administrative function, it would be reporting into the chair. Sorry, functionally to the chair, but administratively to who?
You're speaking specifically of the corporate secretary?
Yeah.
Yes. In terms of the corporate secretarial function, they report into the board and therefore the chair, but administratively, there are certainly aspects like coordinating this meeting, coordinating other meetings, et cetera, where it becomes more of a staff function, and that means reporting into the CEO.
Okay. And is that going to be incorporated into the mandate at all?
Well, we weren't anticipating changing it. I mean, I think it's you know, the role is, I mean, it does say collaborating and working with staff, et cetera. So there wasn't specific changes we were going to put in place there, but I'm happy to look at it in that view, if you would.
We can take a look at whether we can identify, the dual reporting responsibility based on function, right?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that it's all very amicable at the moment, but in the future, just in case, it's good that the chair has the opportunity to use their sway.
I'm sorry, absolutely, Patrick. I think, from my view, it's the line of reporting to the chair is clear, but I'm happy to add in language to that effect.
Yeah. Okay. And just go from there. Thank you.
Okay.
And sorry, I guess one other element is if there is any in terms of variable compensation or anything like that, is that something that the chair would have some input into? Would we need to formalize that input?
So I'll answer that. So when it comes to compensation for the executive team, other than myself, the board has responsibility for my variable comp. I report to the board what I propose with regards to variable comp for the senior team, which some of you went through last year. But really, that delegation is to me. But I do engage both the chair and other board members for feedback before I make that decision.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so based on this discussion, Ian, are you thinking that we can still ask for a recommendation for approval by the board for the mandate of the corporate secretary, or do we want to make some changes for the next meeting?
Well, I think what I would ask is that this committee recommends approval of the mandate, but if you look in the resolution, says in the form presented to the meeting, and we just add with such changes as were discussed.
Okay, very good. So as Ian's indicated, we'd like to recommend for approval by the board of mandate for the corporate secretary of the corporation, which has been distributed to the meeting. The materials and form of the resolution are in your board book. And may I please have a motion to recommend for approval the mandate of the corporate secretary?
Happy to move it, Xander.
And I'll second as Wendy. Any discussion? All in favor? Contrary minded? Okay, so moved. So now we move on to the new director appointment process. And I'm sure all the directors know there's currently a process underway for the new federal appointments to the board of directors. There are currently 2 vacancies, and Maz's term ends December 31st. So I asked Ian Ness to remind us of the process, and I'd ask that if anyone on this call is aware of potential candidates for the board, that they make them aware of this opportunity. It's my understanding that the deadline is November 15th, so it's coming up very soon.
Sorry,
We'll update you on that.
Sorry. Yeah, well, sorry, finish, and then there has been one recent change. So sorry, I apologize. We interrupted.
Okay,
But you,
well, so
you
go ahead, Ian.
No, we just found out yesterday, the day before, that the process has been extended to November 30th, 30.
Oh, terrific. Okay,
So there's more opportunity,
that's great.
at least more time. Yep.
Very good. Thank you. So Ian, do you want to please take everybody through this, or is that enough in terms of just raising the awareness?
Well, certainly the key here was to raise awareness, but and now the changed time frame. But in the board book, starting at page 14, you'll see the actual form. There is a link available, but the actual form that the federal government has put out, and it sets out some of the criteria and some of the factors that are looking at. So I would certainly encourage everybody on the call to look at that, consider if they are aware of any suitable candidates, and encourage those people to apply. We would ask that if any director is aware of somebody that's interested, just so we keep a list, as it were, if they could let us know. Ed Chalupka, our Director of Government Relations, is maintaining that list, but they should feel free to send a name to any of George, myself, or Ed.
Thank you,
Okay.
Ian. It's a great opportunity to bring some diversity and different expertise to our board. So I do hope everybody sends it out and reaches out to people that they think would be interested in the board. Any questions on this piece at all?
Chair, if I
think
may.
Patrick has one.
Yes.
And then
Go
I have
ahead,
one.
Patrick.
Well, let me let the committee member go first. So Andrew, go ahead.
Oh, sure. I was happy to go second, but my only question, or more of a point, was I've been getting some sort of cold emails from people reaching out, inquiring about the board position, asking to have a discussion with me about the board, so on and so forth. I've been demurring those. And so I'm just wondering, is there somewhere I could point folks relative to a place on the website or something to that effect, just to be able to have a graceful sort of area to point them to? Because I don't think it's appropriate for me to be engaging with potential candidates. I'm not sure if they're potential or not, but it was just more as a place I could point people because there's been a couple of people reaching out to me.
Sure, Andrew, you should, it's Ian, you should feel free to direct them to me, and I can make sure they have access to the appropriate information. There is information and there's links on our website. There's the government form itself, which is in the board book, but I'm happy to talk to them about the process and direct them to the right people as need be.
Thanks, Ian.
Yep.
Patrick?
I think, I guess on a follow-up to that, would it be feasible to send an email to all the board members, just reflecting how best to manage those situations? Because in a similar fashion, I had some inquiries, which on the one hand, I'm happy to engage, but I don't know. I don't know those people specifically, so puts me in an awkward position.
That's a really
Patrick, I think that's a great idea.
Yes.
So, sorry.
And so this might be a little bit of a challenging question. I realize that the federal government has put out certain criteria. What I would ask is if management sees a particular skill set that they would be more, that they feel might be a gap on the board, that in directors reaching out to their network could keep in mind.
If I can address that one, Wendy.
Yes,
We've engaged with the federal government, both on terms of really two priority areas. One is, as our chair has said, Wendy, that diversity is one of our priorities. So we want to make sure we have a diverse board. But the second thing is there's certain skill sets that we would like to have complementary in terms of the board. And that's really probably one of the biggest gaps is accounting. It would be great as we go through all of our financials to have somebody who's either a CA or has a designation that would be able to speak to those issues on the board level.
Thank you.
That's great. So that was a very good point, Patrick and Andrew. So Ian, will you follow up with the board with just a little bit of direction on how to proceed here for the board members?
Yes, we'll excuse me, we'll make sure that there's communication either from myself or from George to the board members.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So now we have the human resources update, and we will hear from Rose, VP of Human Resources, and George. Rose, over to you.
Thanks, Wendy. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to take the report as read, and I'm just going to highlight a few things before I turn it over to George. I want to say very strongly that since George has come on board, his mandate has been to make Waterfront Toronto an evolving, growing, and learning environment together. Here at Waterfront Toronto, we feel we are a workplace that respects and appreciates what makes employees different and makes efforts to make employees of all backgrounds feel welcomed and equally treated. We are committed to be a workplace where all employees feel that they belong, can contribute, and can thrive. We want to create a work-life effectiveness, which is doing our best work at the best time with the best talent available to us. This helps Waterfront Toronto be adaptable, resilient, and agile. This requires deliberate and intentional actions. We need to see actions. The board needs to see actions. Some of our actions that are underway today that are highlighted in the report that you may have read, I just want to highlight to a couple of things. With respect to Indigenous involvement, in order for us to strengthen and grow our working relationship with the Indigenous community, we've signed an MOU with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations. We have an Indigenous field liaison rep that monitors all excavation on the Portlands. We've engaged an Indigenous consultant to advise on Indigenous cultural considerations in the Portlands. We're also recruiting for an Indigenous design expert to join Waterfront Toronto's design review panel. I also am happy to say that we are almost at 99% of all Waterfront Toronto staff, board of directors, and design review panel members that have participated in our Indigenous cultural safety training that has been an in-depth 8-week training program to develop understanding, enhance our self-awareness, and promote positive partnerships. With respect to creating an inclusive workplace, in order for us to be committed to creating a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplace, and to focus on fostering an inclusive, culture-free from discrimination environment, we've also taken a few steps. We've had all staff participate in respect in the workplace training. Our very small HR team has been taking on training that teaches us how to battle systemic racism in the workplace. We've revised our job postings. We're actually looking at revising some of our guidelines and practices. Further actions to come in 2021. We want to extend our Indigenous cultural training with the post-training, and this is from taking us from bystander to ally. And I'm happy to say that George and his assistant right now are currently taking this course. All staff will be participating in this training in 2021. There's also some permanent and temporary Indigenous art pieces that are planned along the waterfront for 2021. We're also looking at, as I mentioned earlier, to enhancing our recruitment process. We're also bringing some additional mandatory training, which is will focus on fostering an inclusive, culture-free workplace and deal with unconscious bias. We also are going to engage a D&I consultant to develop and implement a comprehensive program. We feel that we have a corporate social responsibility to make a positive impact on communities and to be allies to support people outside of our own group. We need to establish a sense of belonging, treat all employees fairly, offer equal opportunity for growth, and support innovation and creativity and educate employees on D&I further than what we already have. We're taking this diversity, inclusion, and equity to be a very important initiative, and we need to do it right. George has also been looking at barriers with regards to retention and our needs and growth opportunities for existing staff. I'll turn it over to George now before taking any questions.
Thanks. Thank you, Rose. As Rose has identified, when I came aboard, this was a real important priority for me. And Patrick, who was on the hiring panel, would know, even in the interview for this position, I highlighted to the panel that I felt this is extremely important in terms of the branding for this organization, because we are, known across the world as being one of the most multicultural cities in the entire world. We need to reflect and understand the different cultures. So what I'm probably most proud of is we've gone beyond talking about the issue to acting upon the issue. So as Rose said, she's only touched on a few measures that we've taken. We've taken a number of actions in terms of diversity file, and I'll touch on a few, as Rose already highlighted. We are already requiring all of our staff and the design review panel and the board to take on the training that is being provided with regards to Indigenous cultural and safety. As Rose said, we're almost totally complete in terms of the participation there. I think that knowledge, and I'm going to give an example, the design review panel has completed that training that was mandatory, and I engaged them prior to the last design review panel meeting, which actually was about to review the Anishinaabe Health Toronto proposal. And we talked a bit about, what they found useful, or did they find the training useful? Almost unanimously, actually unanimously, I wouldn't even say almost, everybody found it very helpful. So we had a great discussion about how we could change how we approach how the panel could approach proponents bringing in their designs. And it was interesting because I stayed on for the next panel discussion. And not only were we clearly sensitive to how we should be listening and engaging with the Aboriginal or Indigenous group, but clearly I think the panel learned there were things that would be useful in terms of the changing approach that the panel had to all future applicants. And I think that resonated. I think people realized that there were things that we could learn through that training that not only apply to engaging the Indigenous community as they are partners with us, but just really gave us a better insight as to how we could get a better relationship with all of the proponents that come before the design review panel. So again, even though this was focused on Indigenous training, it really has benefited the organization in multiple ways. One of the other things that I'd like to point out in terms of action is we are looking at obviously identifying successors for, in particular, all of our senior or our critical positions. And I put in the performance contracts for this year that they should be applying a lens, diversity lens. So I'd be looking for them to broaden their network as they start to identify potential successors to make sure that we have diverse candidates in that pool. So that is a requirement, and we'll be reporting back to the board as we move forward on that issue. The other thing I'd like to point out on the diversity agenda is that Waterfront Toronto, for the first time partnering with the Waterfront BIA, has announced the Black Speculative Arts Movement of Canada as being the successful group in our first ever Waterfront Artistic Residency Program. And that was both intentional in terms of creating an opportunity to get more art and develop artistic talent. But again, it was focused on how do we really cross-pollinate some of our other priorities in the organization, including diversity. So, we're really excited about the prospect of working with that group moving forward. As I mentioned before, we've highlighted to the federal government that diversity should be one of the considerations in terms of the future board members. And the chair and I will be re-emphasizing that issue with the minister, federal minister of infrastructure tomorrow. I'm also, as Rose said, very conscious of the fact we have a lot of great talent in this organization. I'm really proud of the group we have here. It is a small organization and we punch above our weight, but it creates some challenges with regards to career laddering for some of our staff, as there are only a certain number of positions in the organization. So we're going to continue to look at how we keep them engaged in terms of learning opportunities, and also looking at maybe creating more career laddering opportunities, introducing also probably some more junior positions so that people can move in and up through the organization. The only other thing I would probably say is, and this is more than just addressing the diversity issues, we've been very productive in the remote work since the pandemic, and we were very fortunate that we were progressive in the sense of we had a pilot prior to the pandemic. So we've been able to work remotely, and we will be continuing to look at what does this mean with regards to when we return full-time back to the office, and what should that new blended model look like. So we will work with this committee and keep you apprised of the endeavors that we've identified, among other things that we will probably share with the board in the future.
So thank you, George and Rose, for your leadership. I know over the last 6 weeks, we've been talking a lot about how important D&I is, and I'm really seeing a strong commitment to making a difference here, and very, very important. Does anyone have any questions? Andrew, do you have any questions, as you're my only other committee member here today?
No, I have none. I thought it was a good report. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Patrick, our honorary member today.
Thank you. I mean, I guess I would only have a statement that, the metrics that we're going to use to follow the employee diversification, I would, from a board perspective, like to see them tie into larger metrics that we're using as a corporation with our stakeholder relations and engagement on the waterfront, so that people can not only see that diversification within the workplace, but also in the work that they're doing.
Right. So aligning the expertise is what you're talking about as well.
Well said. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
That's why I'm only honorary.
No, having you here today. We're now moving into the corporate reputation dashboard, and as you know, stakeholder relations is a really important part of what we do at Waterfront Toronto. So I've invited Cameron McKay, our VP of Strategic Communications and Engagement, to give us a presentation on what his team is currently working on. Cameron?
Thank you, Wendy. Good morning, everyone. For a couple of years now, we've been contemplating and considering how we can introduce a number of metrics that help both the board and management understand the prevailing winds of our stakeholders, broadly defined. During the sidewalk period, we didn't feel it would be very profitable to launch that undertaking because there was just so much noise around it. And we really are now in a position to introduce a program that will help, again, both the board understand where stakeholders' minds are at, and management to calibrate how we both prioritize and communicate with those audiences. We're in our 20th year of our mandate, and really we need to be vigilant in making sure that our reputation and our reality are congruent. So we are known for design excellence. We are known for leading the charge in sustainability. We are known for, quote unquote, the gold standard for public communication and stakeholder engagement. Are those things really true? Do they meet the reality test? So these are the three kind of problems we're trying to solve. One is to make sure that the reputation and reality gap, that there isn't. I think the second one is, and I think 2020 is a watershed year for all of us, is to understand the changing beliefs and expectations of our stakeholders. Again, we're 20 years in. Things that were priorities 8 months ago may not be priorities today. We need to know that. The third is we have to take two-way communication seriously. And we need to go from speaking to listening, and having a stakeholder engagement program, which is online, what will help us do that. It will help us as well as target our messaging and craft our communications in a way that cuts through the sort of content shock everyone's facing, so we can really resonate with our audiences. The private sector has really led the development of these stakeholder monitoring systems and programs, and they did so when they've realized that many of their assets were now intangible. And you see those S&P numbers over the 500 since 1975. So we're now catching up as a quasi-public sector agency and able to introduce through a proliferation of vendors a program that will allow us to ping periodically a standing group of stakeholders probably in the order of 400, though I will leave it to the vendor community to respond to an RFP and to tell us what they think. And we will be able to, over time, test with this audience, which will be broadly configured, broadly recruited, test views and perspectives on not just on projects, which we tend to do with our stakeholder advisory committees. We ask them, should the pond go here, or the bench go there, or the grass go there? We're going to be asking things about our character and values and purpose, and are we living up to our mandate? And so this will give us over time a sense of how we're performing and how we can improve our performance with our stakeholders over time. So that was it, Wendy. That was that's it, and I'd be delighted to entertain questions.
Wendy, if it's okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. I'm totally supportive of this, and hope the board would be supportive as well. I did talk to, and we've done surveys before in this organization, and I talked to Mark Wilson, a former chair, about the challenges, because very few people actually know what Waterfront Toronto is. So that in itself is a challenge, and very few people actually understand the responsibilities of the 3 different levels of government, never mind Waterfront Toronto that has the composition that includes all 3. So one of our challenges is how do we, continue to measure our relevance and our knowledge in terms of what the public views us as, recognizing that many of the public will not actually understand who we are and what we are. We need to elevate that opportunity as well.
That is one of the challenges, George. I mean, Coke has Pepsi and McDonald's has Burger King. You can index against peers. We don't really have a lot of peers to index against.
Yeah, and it's, some of this is inside baseball for us. People actually don't understand what Creatio is, what we are, what Infrastructure Ontario is.
Yeah.
But it is something that we should be measuring. So.
And I think, George, you make a very good point. What is important now, when we're not being sort of, when we don't have the Quayside taking up all of the attention at this stage, that we do bring awareness to the Portland's project, the Cherry Street North Bridge, these kinds of initiatives that really do get the public very excited. And so building awareness and reputation and identity through that piece. So I think the initiatives that Cameron's been undertaking are really important. Andrew, any comments from you?
No, none. I thought it's good.
Okay, very good. Any other discussion on corporate reputation and any questions for Cameron?
If I may.
Go ahead, Patrick.
I was just a little surprised that it was 400 participants, in that I would have thought there would also been like just a social media channel evaluation, and that reputation would, given this digital age, be quite influenced by that. So not having any background there, I just throw that out. And then the other would be, given that we're launching philanthropy, is there going to be an eye to the impact of reputation on philanthropy? Because it needs to be, I would suggest, closely tied. Thank you.
Cameron?
So there will be a lens on our favorability in terms of our media impressions and our performance in social, both in terms of how many eyeballs see our content, but how many people engage with it. I mean, George mentioned the Bridge Watch, or the arrival of the bridge. We had almost 6,000 people directed to our website as a consequence of our social posting. We've never seen that before. We usually get about 10,000 impressions on a piece of social content. We were getting 100,000 on Bridge Watch. So we're quite attuned to how we're performing, both in terms of reach and in terms of sentiment, in terms of are we on the right track? So that is certainly a lens, Patrick, that we will always keep our minds on. The idea of having a standing group of stakeholders allows us to have a more of a longitudinal understanding of where the temperature is at, as opposed to doing a random sampling, every sort of 6 months. We have this sort of focus group, if you will, of people who are with us. Now, we don't expect all 400, and I'm making 400 up, but that's a notional idea, but I think that might be the size of the pool that we recruit. And then we will be able to then say, okay, well, let's listen to that stakeholder group on this issue. They were kind of cool about this, or they were hot about this, or whatever it is, so that we have some continuity. And that'll be very important. And in terms of fundraising, that's going to be a critical ingredient, I think, for the people that will consider supporting us. We need to be able to go to them and say we're a reliable, trusted partner. People like us, your money and your reputation are safe with us. So I can see that dovetailing perfectly.
Any further questions? Cameron, thank you very much. Okay, so now we are going to have a motion to go into closed session. So can I please have a motion to discuss item 9 and 10 of today's agenda? And I just want to remind everyone that, oh, go ahead.
No, I just said I'm happy to move it, but I'm happy to wait till you finish before I move it.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. I just want to remind everyone that any resolution considered in the closed session needs to be passed when the meeting returns to open session. Is there a mover?
Happy to move.
Thank you, and I will second. All in favor? Okay, so moved. Okay, so we're now in the public session and we've returned to the open session and we've resumed the recording of the session. So may I please have a motion to approve the June 11th committee meeting closed session minutes? Is there a mover?
So moved.
And I will second. Any discussion? All in favor or contrary minded? Approved. Okay, so now we have a motion to terminate the meeting. Having concluded the business of the meeting, I ask for motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a mover and a seconder of such motion?
So moved.
Okay, and I will second.
So moved. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So I now declare the meeting terminated, and thank you very much for your participation. Hope you're safe and healthy, and look forward to meeting very soon at our next board meeting on March next. Well, actually, our next committee meeting is March 4th. And the board meeting is December
10.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Have a great
Take care.
day.
Thanks very much,
Thank you, everyone.
Care.